Hey, everybody, and welcome to what used to be called the Dreamcatchers podcast. Oh man, I said that with excitement. I don't know
Yeah.
how excited I am about that. This has been 6 years,
Mhm.
6 years of the Dreamcatchers podcast, and we are making a shift. Matt twisted my arm and held me down and told me, Jerome, give it up. And
Uh,
so here we are.
Listen, man, first off, there's no in hell I can ever hold you down. Let's just be very, very clear. But yes, I totally twisted your arm on this. And the reason why is because everything that you're doing now with your coaching program is really focusing on your next. The book, the assessment, the interviews that you've been doing. If you look at the format and you look at where you're taking people, are you still helping people figure out what they want to be when they grow up and really catch that dream? You are, but this allows you to be much more direct, much more singular focused, and allows your audience to really truly get what, and I love saying this word, the Jerome-ness that you bring to people's lives. So the new podcast, I need you to say it out loud. So what is this going to be officially from here on out?
You're next.
You're next. What does NEXT stand for? Because NEXT is an acronym, and I don't know how many people actually know what NEXT stands for, but I think it's a very potent way for you to look at this exit paradox.
Yeah, so next stands for Nourish, Evaluate, Explore, and Transcend. And that's our four-step process for helping people conquer the exit paradox and build a legacy that they're going to be proud of creating. I think so many people go in to sell their business, then they regret it. And it's like, man, you're one of a very small percentage. So just to put things in perspective, only 2 out of 10 businesses that get listed sell. Of the two that sell, 75% of those folks regret selling their business. And so the odds are stacked against you if you're going to have success as a business owner who exited. And we call that exiting the excellence. So we've decided to go on this mission to help eradicate people regretting selling their business by giving them the process of exiting the excellence.
And exiting into the unknown is scary. No matter what archetype you are in your personality profile, which we just recently did in a podcast too. Or I'm sorry, maybe that's the one that's coming up. Whatever. We just recorded that. We really dove into the assessment a little bit more deeply. But Jerome, I was in preparation of talking to you about this. I listened to a couple of your previous episodes, and you're interviewing people who have achieved unbelievable level of success and who have either sold or are going to be exiting. I think you said this to me early on in our relationship. There are three ways that people exit their business. The business dies, they sell their business, or they voluntarily get rid of the business, or they die. Right. And now that's hyper simplistic. And I know there's lots of other different ways to do it. But really, when you look at people's level of happiness, when you look at people's longevity, if they don't have a plan and they don't know what's next, they don't have their next, it cannot be a good thing.
Well, it's not. And it's why people say they're going to die in a meeting or they're never going to retire.
Mhm.
And it's fine if you choose to continue to work. But our goal is to make it so that your work optional. Right. Or for me, retirement and work optional are synonymous. And the point, from my perspective, is to get people in a place where they get rewarded for all of the sacrifice that they made over the years. They get the liquidity event, they get the sacrifice, they get the capital, they get the cash so that they could go and make the investments in other things. It was funny. I was listening to a Warren Buffett interview, and he was talking about diversification and how, a portfolio has to be diversified in a lot of different respects. And then he also went in to say diversity is something you do when you don't know what you're doing. And what I found is that many people only know how to do one thing after being in business 20 or 30 years. They only feel like they know how to run that business. They don't understand all of the diversified skills that they've created and cultivated over that period, and how that stuff is transferable into a bunch of other things where they can get even more rewarding outcomes and potentially even more lucrative outcomes by utilizing those skill sets against a different problem.
I don't know if I've actually ever heard you describe it like that. I think that's absolutely fantastic. As a business owner, we do have lots of different skills. We might have been pigeonholed into one specific role within the company, but even that role, when you deconstruct it, has lots of different skills. And when you look at that and when you go through your process, right, when you go through the coaching program and you go through all of those different things, now all of the sudden you really start to see that, oh my gosh, there's a lot more to me than this one dimensional person that I've been for so long. And I think that's fantastic. I mean, dude, I've known you for quite a while, but I love the idea of the diversification of personality. And you talk about, and you're going to talk about this in, this new version of this, the founder's exit paradox and the exits. So would you mind kind of breaking those down just a little bit so that the audience can be reminded of what those are, so they can listen for those things as you relaunch the show?
Yeah, so the exit paradox is the problem that we're solving. And the exit paradox is tied to the unraveling of the founder's identity from the business's identity so that the two can go off and be their own next best version of themselves. Now, some people are like, what do you mean, next best version of themselves? The business isn't a person. The business has an identity
Yeah.
as well as the person. And for too long, many of us connect the two and they should never be separated. But you're not Siamese twins. You're not Siamese twins with the business. The business is its own thing and it should go off. And if you choose to sell it, it should go off with the new owner and grow and prosper and flourish. And you shouldn't be empty, devastated, and defunct because you decided to sell the business because all of your identity was wrapped up in that.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want from our founders, and remember, only 20% of founders actually get to a place where they get a liquidity event. And more often than not, 75% of the time, people regret that exit. Uh, we don't want you defining yourself as X this or founder of that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, but we do. We really, really do. All right. So here's what I'd like for you to do. Sorry, I'm trying to bring up something on my screen here. Um, can you please go through the exits?
Okay. So there are 8 exits of a founder. This is a framework we created a couple of years ago. And you think about it like a you are here map in the mall. And so the first exit of a founder is leaving corporate America. And this is where you go out into the wild and you're free and you're trying to figure out what you do. And it's you call yourself a CEO, but it's not sexy because you are the janitor. You go get the paper from the store because it's not going to show up in the file cabinet for you. You do all the sales, you do all the billing. You're chief everything officer. And the CEO stands for chief everything officer, not chief executive officer, because
Yeah.
I don't even know if you're actually an executive if you don't have any people reporting to you. From there, you then exit and you become somebody who is managing people. You're kind of a frontline supervisor. And so in this exit, you are, some things are getting done, but they're only getting done at your direction. And this is the thing that's really important for folks to understand. Delegation is an art. It's a skill set that most people really struggle with. And there's going to be a belief that you could do it better than the people that you bring into the team. But once you made that exit, once you go through that paradox, you've got to evolve and emerge as a new person so that you can have those people doing the things and you can use that leverage of their time and energy to get an outcome that you couldn't get if it was just you doing the things. Then you go up to the next level, which is thought leader, right? And as a thought leader, you're out in this world letting people know that what you do is different from other folks, right? Your process, your approach, that is different than other people in the marketplace. And that's going to attract employees, it's going to attract clients. And this is going to make your business stand out so that you can get that top talent so that you can then become a true CEO, CEO 2.0. CEO 2.0 is when you actually become a chief executive officer. That's when you have people doing the things. You're doing strategic work, you're casting the vision, but you're still involved in the day to day. And that involvement in the day to day is what keeps your identity wrapped up in the business. And so we look for people to go to that next level, which is chairman of the board, so that they could get out of the day to day. That intermediate step that many people skip when they're going to exit is one that we think is really valuable. And so if you're not in the business day to day, you can then start to create that identity and that purpose outside of the business. If you go from working 60 hours a week, like a lot of CEOs, to zero, if you go to straight to an exit, it can be pretty abrupt. We call it a head-on car accident. But if you put on the seatbelt, you hit the brakes, you're being chairman of the board, you start thinking about the business like a product instead of the products that the business sells as the product,
Mhm.
you can detach and really enjoy this process of going through the sell of the business. So once you're chairman of the board, then the next level or the next exit is the liquidity event. And so for us, that's exit six.
Yeah.
And that is when you become work optional if you're fortunate enough to have one of those seven, eight, or nine-figure exits that I think so many people are aspiring to when they get into
Mhm.
business. From there, we then want to talk about the post-exit portfolio. And so you traded all of your cash flow in for a lump sum of money. Well, what do you do with that lump sum of money? You probably want to turn it back into cash flow. And so are you just putting in a stock market? And we talked about Warren Buffett earlier. Uh, let's bring him back up. Do you want a diversified portfolio? Do you just want concentration in one asset class and one type of asset? What do you want to do with that? And so you need to have a strategy. A lot of folks think financial advisors are the only answer for this. I'm not convinced that they are, but in a lot of ways, they are helpful. And so you
Mhm.
do want some type of financial plan. And then the final exit is what we call, um, you having your philanthropic foundation um, fully endowed. And,
Mhm.
there's a lot of words there. The acronym that we like to use is PIL, Proceeds Invested for a Lasting Legacy.
Mhm.
And so if you have this problem or this cause, and it's something that we identify when people are doing the next intensive, that you want to see taken advantage of, this problem that you want eradicated from the face of the planet, you're going to need some funds in order to be able to do that. And we believe a portion of your exit proceeds may be a great way
Ah,
to invest and get that foundation working and working in a way where you don't have to run around a fundraise to keep the operation moving. And it can go on in perpetuity if done right.
yeah. Well, that was a lot of ground to cover. I'm going to give you a minute to breathe. Because you just went through a whole bunch of stuff there. And I think it's fantastic because, those one of the neat things about your program is that there's a linear component in A plus B equals C, and it really does go from here to here. But what you have also found is sometimes, this happens and then this happens, and it doesn't always happen in that pretty order, because, well, life. And when you're interviewing people for this new iteration of the show, identifying where they are on in their exits, right? But then really taking this next approach. So you went through what next stands for. I'd like to take a little bit of time to break that acronym down just a little bit more. Okay. So let's start at the top. So hit me again with all four of them, and then let's break down Nourish.
Okay, so next is Nourish, Evaluate, Explore, and Transcend. And Nourish is the one that most entrepreneurs, founders want to skip over. They don't like sitting and relishing in the fact that they achieved or accomplished something. Their goal is to move on to the next thing. And that's served them well up until this point. But if they don't take a breath and really take an assessment on the skills that they've developed and acquired and how they might be able to reuse those in a different way, make them use them as transferable skills, they're going to be trapped in a prison that they might not be able to get out of. And
Mm.
for many folks, they skip this step and then they're trying to figure out, well, what am I good at? So then they adopt the framework or the philosophy or the thought process that they aren't good at anything except the thing that they've done for the past 20 or 30 years.
Mm, yeah. All right. Next. I
So
just can't keep
then
saying that.
there's
Sorry. It makes me happy.
evaluate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Evaluate's the next step. And so think about this like a gap assessment. And so in
Oh.
Nourish, we took inventory of all the things that are available. We took inventory of the resources that
Hmm.
are available. And now we're looking across the landscape at, well, how can we deploy these resources to get the maximum return on investment?
Mm,
We're also looking for efficiencies because if there's a complementary skill set that needs to be developed, I mean, how difficult is it going to be if we've already got two out of the three things needed in order to be successful at the thing? And
mhm.
so evaluation is that next step. We're looking at what can we do with the resources that we have available and also making decisions on whether we actually develop those skills, make them, or do we buy them, bring in talent to
Mm,
accomplish or overcome whatever gaps we may have.
mm. All right. So explore.
Yeah, Explorer is the cutesy one, right? We drop the E and lead with the X. But in exploring, we know that we don't know all the details. We
Oh.
do know that we're heading in the right direction. If I go back to my go to California from North Carolina example, I could go west or I could go east.
Mhm.
I know that I should go west. And so I'm heading west. But maybe I don't know exactly what city I'm going into in California. California's pretty big, but me starting out heading west isn't going to make me backtrack as long as I hone in on what part of the state I'm going to fairly early in the journey. And so then once I hone into what part of the state I'm going to, I could get to the city. And then maybe I could get to the street. And then eventually I get to the building number. I think for a lot of people, they want to know the building number before they start the journey, and it's just not necessary. And so as you're exploring,
Mm,
you're refining that targeting until you get to the place that you want to get to. You know, the headlights only go 50 or 75 feet in front of the car, right? So you don't need to be able to see the whole way. And this exploration is part that actually makes the journey exciting because you
yeah.
don't know everything. And the boredom that comes with knowing everything is something that I think most entrepreneurs wouldn't get excited about. And
Yeah.
so the exploration is actually figuring out how you're going to achieve or accomplish the mission that you've set out on achieving or accomplishing.
Yeah. Man, I don't know if I'm just weird, but man, I don't know crap about much, dude. In the grand scheme of things. And so that's I think that's such an important, I know humility is not your favorite word, but I think it's a reality that people really need to focus on, that they need to realize that just because you've been wildly successful, this is one of the reasons why I love what you're doing here. Just because you've been so wildly successful in this one thing doesn't mean that you can see all of the other things that you're about to go through, which is why the assessment is so important and the next intensive is so important for people to read the book, right? But anyway, because this is leading me all to this last part of the acronym, which is transcendent. So, what does that mean to you?
So transcending is when you step into the new space.
Mm,
So, you think be do have the transcendence is the being, right? You actually have become this person. And it's like, well, what do you mean, Jerome? Well, all right, we took inventory of your skills, and then we came up with a strategy, and then we started executing that strategy, and there's some doing there, but it doesn't actually you don't get to have the things until you actually truly become that person. And you become that person through the actual doing of the stuff.
mm,
Now, I think most people would be like, oh, well, in traditional be do have fashion, I would already have to be the person to do the things. The fact of the matter is you're applying, you are the person technically, but you haven't applied the skills and the behaviors in this way before. And so you're reaching in your bag, you're pulling out your arrow, and you've got some new shots. You got some new shots. And I think for some folks, they're going to struggle with the fact that they've got some new shots. You know,
Mm,
I'm an old dog. I don't know if you can teach an old dog new
mhm.
tricks. You can. The dog has to be willing to learn. And so as
Yeah.
long as you're a willing participant, as long as you're excited about the journey and, having some uncertainty is necessary in order to get excited about something, then you're going to have success. And so this transcendence is just moving to that next level. It is embodying it. It's taking over your identity instead of you being former or ex. That's just one of the arrows in your quiver. And you've got this whole new bag and you've got this new identity.
Now, so guests moving forward, what can they expect, and then what can your listeners expect from the new show?
Yeah, I don't know that it's going to be totally different. A lot of
Hmm.
the things that really excited us about the Dreamcatchers podcast are still going to be there.
Hmm.
Still going to have amazing guests who made their dreams a reality. And we're going to unpack how they did that. There is going to be more of a focus on, well, what's the problem that you're working on now?
Hmm.
What are you actually eradicated from the face of the planet? And how did you get there? We haven't really unpacked that part. We've spent a lot of time talking about, well, what was the exit paradox? How did you experience it? Did you know it was coming? But there wasn't a lot of focus on, okay, so now what are you working on?
Hmm.
What's your new identity? And how has your journey been from old to new, becoming this new person?
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited about that component of it. And I'm also really excited because hopefully what we're going to be able to do is to get the guests to take the personality assessment so that you have that foundational language to be able to walk them through. Because through transcendence and through what's next, all of those personality profiles that we have actually talked about before and that is part of your whole system would be an absolutely fantastic level set. So everybody says, oh my God, right now Jerome is interviewing Trinity. We already kind of know what issues Trinity's going to have, and then how are they really going to truly transcend? Um, and really, well, actually, I mean, all four of the next things. But really, what are they going to do to eradicate? Jerome, I'm going to put you on the spot. You're not prepared for this. Um, so I'm just warning the audience that I'm winging you out of left field with a question. Um, what do you want to eradicate or have more of in the world?
Oh, suffering. Founders suffering on the backside of their exit. I think it's totally unnecessary for someone who spent 20, 30 years building something special, solving problems for people, hitting the lottery only to hate their life. I
Yeah.
think that's a atrocity. I think it's a tragedy. And we want to eradicate that from the face of the planet. We want everybody to exit to excellence.
You know, when I first started working with you, one of the videos that you had shared with me was a conference that you had been to. So I'm taking this full circle and where we are with the podcast and where we are with your brand and where we are with the focus of where you're going with your company and your coaching forward. And it was J-Cron. And so would you mind reminding everybody of the J-Cron story and kind of how that triggered a huge epiphany for you and why we've decided to move so aggressively into this space?
Yeah, so I'm sitting in the back of a business conference and a guy's giving his 7 steps to a double unicorn exit. And he gets to a point where he says, yeah, I was having an existential crisis. And, I'm inquisitive. That was a new word for me. I said, how'd you know you're having a crisis? He said, my wife told me. I was like, oh, uh-oh, we're in trouble now. And I
Yeah.
said, you ready? He said, I don't know. You're setting me up. I said, well, it's coming. And I said, so how'd you get out of it? And he said, I'll let you know when I do.
Yeah.
And so then I dove down the rabbit hole because I was like, well, if the guy with all the money doesn't
Yeah.
have an answer to the problem,
Yeah.
then who's working on it?
Yeah.
And I found that nobody was really working on it. I
Mhm.
found a Harvard Business Review article that said, you sold your business. Congratulations. Prepare to be depressed. And I don't think that is the fate of a founder, I don't think that anybody should live that as their experience. And that's what we want to do. We want
Yeah.
to make sure that nobody is stuck in a existential crisis or what we call the founder's exit paradox, because they worked so hard, they made so many sacrifices in order to create the success that
Hmm.
they created. And so why should they have to suffer in silence as many do, because they don't want to sound like they're ungrateful, or they don't want to make people feel uncomfortable around them because they're not happy, although they have everything.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up today's show, and thank you for spending time and preparing the audience for a slight shift, at least a shift in the brand, but not necessarily a shift in the overall feeling of the show. But I did prepare for this as I do for all interviews, especially with you, because I want to ask you the tough, hard-hitting questions to really flesh this stuff out for the audience, because I don't think enough people truly think the way that they need to about their exit. But one of my favorite questions to ask somebody at the end of an interview is, what should I have asked you that I didn't?
Man, that one's a tough question. It's probably the toughest question. I think if I had to pick one question, it would probably be, what does success look like?
Ooh, okay, take that one. Go with that one.
Yeah. And so for me, success looks like nobody being blindsided by the founder's exit paradox,
Ah.
and everybody having a plan for their next. I think it is malpractice for
Mhm.
brokers and other M&A professionals to guide people through their exit and not make sure that they have a plan for what they're going to do next. I've watched so many people go through the process only to get to the other side, to step into the portal, and then realize that nobody came with them, and that what they had certainty about, what they had confidence about, is gone. And they're basically a new person in a new place with no real resources, especially if they didn't do the nourish part of the process. And they are forced through societal pressure, because they don't want to sound tone deaf,
Yeah.
to suffer in silence, because they found out the hard way that money only solves the bottom two rungs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And all of the problems that they have are three, four, five, and then transcendence, which isn't even on the hierarchy of needs, but is something that most people are pursuing. And nobody is paying attention to it. They're all aligned with the transaction.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, Jerome, I'm really, really excited about this new focus, or at least this, sidestep to the right or the left, in order for your audience to have a clearer understanding of what this show is now going to be about from here forward. But I also want people to realize that this framework that we just talked about today, especially with this, this desired outcome from each show, go back and listen to some of the other ones. Because the funny thing is Jerome's already been doing this, right? We just wanted to make sure that everything was clear and on brand with this the new brand, the new identity, and really all of it has to do with the book, right? Making sure that people understand that the book and the podcast and your process and the assessment are all leading toward the same thing, which is exactly what you're trying to eradicate from the world, which is so that founders don't have to go through a painful exit paradox. All right, Jerome. Well, thanks for taking some time with me today. It's always a pleasure to interview you. You allow me to work these muscles that I don't get to work as much as I'd like to. And as a gym rat, you totally understand what I'm talking about there. But I want everybody to know that this is another opportunity for you to re-engage with the show and take a look at the previous episodes and look at those through a little different lens, and also realize what you're going to be getting moving forward. So for Jerome, this is Matt Halloran, and we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.